general meeting to order at 6 o'clock. All board members, with the exception of Jill Smith, are present. Jill is excused. She let me know last night she had a conflict. First up is review and approval of the public meeting minutes.
I have one change.
Okay.
Under the school board reports, so for when I talked about Phil, so it says Randy Johnson stated.
Do you have a line?
There's no
No, there's no
line.
lines. It went away.
Yeah, so the
Oh,
first
on
page
there,
is lines.
oh, because I've got lines on mine
Jelly.
Oh, they're not
Yeah,
on the
that's
second
what she
page.
now. Oh, she did?
So it's on the school.
Oh, it's only
board
at
report.
Oh, okay.
All right,
What happened?
so it says Randy Johnson stated a withdrawal study committee meeting was held last night and that Phil McCormick will be used as a consultant.
Can you, I don't know where you are, I'm sorry.
It's right up here.
Randy Johnson, okay, yeah.
I would like to propose that we add a line that says Phil has recently accepted a position on the New Hampshire School Board Association's Board of Directors. They did not feel that this was a conflict of interest, but wanted to make sure that the board was aware of this.
Yes.
So that was important to them that I tell everyone. I emailed this to you like a second ago.
Oh, I was gonna say, you did?
Yeah. I figured it was
Okay.
easier just to
Yeah.
send you it in
Yeah,
writing
thank you.
than over my email.
Perfect. I saw Greta looking at you like, whoa.
Yeah, like, can you start over?
Yeah.
And go 4 words at a time, please?
Perfect. Anything else, Randy? That's all I have. Yeah, we'll wait for Greta.
So I have one on the second page, under athletics reports, second paragraph.
Yep.
In the middle, it said Sean had concerns with students using the space without supervision. I think my bigger issue was Sean had concerns with students being unable to use the space due to a lack of supervision.
Where are you exactly?
Just-
Sean, also?
No,
right in the
Up
center.
here, sorry, okay.
So I think the bigger issue was more, we're talking about maybe needing more equipment, but if the kids can't use it or if it's never available,
What are you proposing, Sean?
good.
Yeah, is there part of this and then you're adding to it, or?
I think just replacing it.
Okay, all right,
Replace that line.
all right, well done.
Sean had concerns with students being unable to use the space due to a lack of supervision. I think that's what I tried to convey.
Yeah. Anything else?
Okay, so Sean had concerns with students being able to use the
Being
space. Being unable to use the space due to a lack of supervision.
I had one under special education report and counseling report, second paragraph, second sentence. When Mark asked what fell under the other category, it's other health impairment category. So adding health impairment.
H-E-L-P, regular,
Health.
Health, I'm sorry,
Health
I'm sorry.
impairment.
Thank you.
And then, so the cafeteria bids, so it's, what page are we on? The page with business administrator report. We have to add the CES in there, because we approved both. So under award Mitchell cafeteria tables replacement bid, it was included regarding the replacement of cafeteria tables at BES and CES.
Are you at the bottom in the motion?
Well, that, and above.
So the
Okay.
CES cafeteria tables are included in the motion.
Yeah, it's in the motion.
Wait, what?
That's not in the motion.
So the
So,
motion made by
right
Sean
here.
actually does, if you go
Right.
down, the CES cafeteria tables is at the end. Although the motion
Where?
that's
We
made
did
by
it separately.
Jeff, it's not.
Huh?
So, in this, go up a little bit.
That was
So
approving the use of
CES is at the
funds.
bottom.
But that's the approving the use of funds. We
Okay.
never
Right.
Awarded the
approved
bid.
awarding the bid. And
Okay.
the bid was
Gotcha.
awarded, Mitchell cafeteria replacement bid was for BES and CES.
The motion says Hertz tables.
Huh?
Hertz Furniture Experts was the name of the company.
Okay.
Mitchell's is like the table.
Oh. I thought it was the name of the company.
So we'll start over here, so
Oh.
replacement of the BES and CES cafeteria tables.
Motion's at the top of the page.
Mm-hmm.
Did we do it that way though? Cause didn't we approve
Yeah, I
the
don't-
BES and then talk about Canterbury later?
No, so we did it how it is in here. So we did, cause there's.
All together.
Yeah, but we approved, when we discussed budget allocations, we did the CES tables, saying it would come out of unexpended fund balance. Then we awarded the bid to both later.
Okay.
That's why it was confusing, because we agreed to use the money, pay for it. Otherwise, there's nowhere in here that says,
Canterbury will get the
Right.
trains.
Canterbury's gonna get the tables from Hertz.
And that decision was made based on the potential cost increases, and seeing that monies were available
Right.
now, we may as well purchase now.
But I think if we just added
And CES.
and CES
Yeah.
to both places.
Where's the other place then?
At the end of
We,
here.
did numbers just get missed on this?
I'm not sure. They're usually not.
No, see, for me to do it I used to do it in Word, and
Mhm.
send it to myself, and so when I'm doing it in Google now, you can't add numbers, so unless we had some additional fix kind of thing. And so when I email it, then I assume Kim is adding the
Yeah.
numbers. So she probably did page versus entire doc.
Ah, got
I
it.
have it on the to-do list.
Thank
next
you.
to the
Mhm.
minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I added it there, added it in the next page.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? This is then up for action.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Question, sorry. You said as amended, but the last one we started with saying what we were amending it with.
Correct. Correct, but she's gonna list them.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
awesome,
the
okay.
motion I don't list them, no. I don't think it did.
Well, it says it.
Did it last time?
Yeah, I did that way, but I mean,
Yes.
you gave me a whole bunch. If you guys wanna go back to it, I can type it.
I don't remember everything.
We could say with a listed
Actually,
amendment.
Okay,
I
that
figured it
works. All right, that works for me.
I'm never gonna remember
Right,
all
You
that.
get control of something outside of the book.
no, that's good, we are listing them, that's why you emailed them to her, right?
Yes, so that she would have my exact search.
Yeah. Okay, we just voted. Did anyone abstain or say no?
I didn't say anything, I said I have a question.
Okay, so,
You know, I'm fine with it.
next up are the public hearing. The only question I had about this is, don't we normally have them separated into two public hearings?
No, I did it, the last time I did it.
You did it?
The same, yeah, and just separated it between the first and the second. But I used that same format.
approve the minutes for the June 13th public hearings, or as proposed.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Michelle abstains. Okay. Okay, next up is public communication and, oh no, July 11th is the date of our next meeting at Belmont Middle School at 6 o'clock. And Sean will not be in attendance and Alice will not be in attendance. Is there anyone else that you know of at meeting? Can you be at the meeting?
I agree.
Hopefully Jill can, so. All right, next up is public communication and correspondence. I'm thinking people we have public, so this is great. So just be aware when you're giving public communication, please state your name, town you live in. Know that we most likely as a board won't be responding. It just turns on sometimes. So just be aware it's your time to share with us your feedback. Go from there. Anyone?
I can start.
Lisa?
So Lisa Ober from Belmont. I'm just here to talk a little bit about Empower. It's the grading system that me as a parent has to go on to and search for my kids' grades. I was told that the union gave a survey to the teachers about it, and I was wondering if as a school board, maybe you could have parents be surveyed about what they think of Empower. I've also heard that only 2 school districts in New Hampshire use it. I don't like it, so that's why I'm here. It's not user-friendly. A lot of the time, assignments are pending, even if they're completed, because then I email the teachers, and they say, no, that's in. But the system is showing pending, so then I'm up my son's butt saying, why is it, no, I did it. Anyway, so it's just not user-friendly. Also, it's not compatible. My oldest is going to college next year, or he's a senior next year, so he's applying. And from what I've heard from the guidance counselor, it's not very compatible with colleges, so for grading and things like that. So I just would really like you all to really look at Empower and get some feedback from parents. I know teachers have just given their feedback, and just to say, I do not like it at all, and I wish we had a different system. So that's all I've got. You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Can I just interrupt real quick and say, if the parents have the teachers have given feedback, I'd love to see the feedback.
So
So
the
that's
union
where
gave it to them, gave them a survey, their teachers union. So I'm not a teacher in your district, so I just know teachers in the district, so I know this happened. So you could ask your union reps. I'm sure they would be happy to share
Thank you.
the survey results, yeah.
Good information to have, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Sorry. Sorry.
No, I'm going with
in
you.
your way. Okay.
I'm going with you.
Okay.
Okay.
You have more.
I'm Susan Holland from Belmont. I saw on your agenda that you were chatting about the curriculum, the competency curriculum and all that. So my children have all now since graduated, so coming back into this, just as a little bit of a backup to the situation, Sean and I have, our children are the same age, and so we were part of the 8th grade introduction of the competency-based education. I was one of the 12 parents that got rid of Maria Dreyer as the superintendent, because she installed, thank you very much. It was the best thing we did to the district. We were involved in all of that because it was just sort of thrown into the system. The teachers weren't given the proper professional development and the training to do it. They didn't know it. Our children were part of that freshman academy in high school that was basically sort of, here you go, this is what we're gonna do. The kids were completely anxiety ridden, didn't know what they were doing, didn't know what was expected. Basically, it was an art project for level 4. In English and science and math, it's not art, so nobody should be doing art for 4, because nobody knew. There was no deadlines, no homework, no nothing. The kids were completely not in a good headspace for all of them. So Dave Williams came in, knew that this was not a good way of doing this, went back to the 100-point scale. We ended up, the kids were back in, those kids, Sean and I's child, were now graduated with the 100-point scale. My twins, who just graduated 2 years ago, were the first class of the high school to then go back to the 4-point scale, and now everybody has now since done that. So I wanted to give the feedback to now my kids are in college. I was asking them today, I'm like, so what do you think some of the things were? The information that I got was a level 4 was unattainable. Teachers wouldn't give it. Some teachers, I shouldn't say never, there were some teachers that gave it because they just didn't care. And they were like, everybody can have a 4. A lot of the teachers, it was unattainable. You had to do extra work beyond. So what I would love to see happen, and I'm only saying this because I'm a taxpayer, I have this generation that's coming up, and someday they're gonna take care of me, and I hope that they know how to do those things. And I would really like for them to be able to switch back to the 100-point scale. Ultimately, I don't think competency-based has really done much for us, but I know that it's part of the mandated part, but I do think that there's many towns that go to the 100-point scale, and I think it can be done successfully in the 100-point scale. Kids understand what 100 is. They're gonna go to college and it's gonna be in the 100-point scale. We were given a lot of malarkey saying that a lot of the colleges, they get it, they understand, they do it. My kids go to 3 different colleges in 3 different states, and I have heard of many of other friends who have kids in college, they do not do the 4-point scale, they do the 100-point scale. That's what kids know. Kids know deadlines in college, they do not know that in this 4-point scale. They can do all year long to get this work done that they need to get done. They can even go into competency recovery to try to get that stuff done. I think what it comes down to is that we need to, from a standpoint of, it needs to be a different level, and I think we're giving them perfection at a level 4 and unattainable achievement that they can never get. It's meant to never really get it. Nobody's ever really meant to get a 4. Everybody's meant to get a 3. And that is, to me, lowering our bar. I feel like it's dumbing it down for the smart kids, helping maybe some of the other kids that are really struggling to maybe get that 3. This is not necessarily a good thing for kids. I think there's a lot of stress and anxiety. My kids have definitely figured out that they didn't have time management skills because there was very little to no homework done in high school. If you got any, you got an extra few minutes in class to be able to do those things. But they had little to no homework. Now they look back and they're like, I have so much homework. I have no idea they're trying to figure out how to maintain their social life. Like my daughter joined a sorority, trying to figure that piece out, to maintain, to be part of the community. And then to also do all your classes. I actually just chatted with a friend of mine's daughter and said, what are some of the things that you had? She's like, I was not prepared for finals and midterms. And because we don't do that anymore in competency-based. She's like, I had no idea how to study for that when I got to college. High school is supposed to be preparatory. That is what it's meant to be, is preparatory towards college. Now, not every kid goes to college, and that's okay if they don't. But for those kids that want to go to college, they should be prepared and be able to figure this part out. We are asking kids to be perfect in the society right now that we have created perfection through the internet, and there's a lot of filters and a lot of things and a lot of stress that these kids are undergoing that we should not be asking for perfection and making these kids. We have enough kids that are coming in. I work at the hospital at Concord, and there's a lot of kids that are coming in for behavioral issues right now because this is their time when they start to get food insecurity, house insecurity, and they are really worried about everything that they're going through. I don't know why we're adding extra stress to them by doing that. A stress of saying, I got 100 because I did so well in this test, that's what I would rather hear from a kid right now. Then, oh my God, I have to do this whole entire project and then I have to do extra work to get a 4 because that's what the teachers are doing. they're not doing it the same way as if you were doing it through a 100-point scale. And I think we need to understand that, and I think we need to change our bar. Hopefully, Empower was sort of ridiculous. It never was, you could never figure it out. There's gotta be a way to make Empower be able to go back to a 100-point scale or change a different software. I wanna be able to have people come to this town and I wanna be proud of the town. We were always proud of the school. The paperwork, the newspaper article that just came out about the top 10 kids and some of the things that they said, I was embarrassed about. And it was ridiculous, and I was like, almost like, I live in Belmont. I don't want that to be. I want our school to be good. I want people to be able to come into this town and bring their children and to be able to do that so that we can continue to have rigor. I don't want people to leave the town, because I know school choice is out there, and I know that they can take their money and they can go to other places, and I don't want them to do that. I want us to be able to, I don't wanna raise my taxes because people are leaving the town, because we can't get our stuff together and figure that out. So why would we want to put that there? And I think we should go back to deadlines. I think we need to go back to homework. We need to go back to the 100-point scale. And we need to be able to have midterms and finals so these kids know how to do this. They know how to take notes. They don't even know, my kids didn't even know how to do the APA format. My kid got a 0 in her assignment because she didn't know how to do the APA format and was trying to figure it out, and she missed the deadline and got a 0. Had to claw her way back out of that 0, pass the course, but why would we have to do that? We only teach the MLA. We don't even teach the APA. Like, there are many things that we do. So we need to start looking at what we're doing and figuring that stuff out. And I think that that is what the kids deserve, and they deserve better. I hope you guys can figure that out and do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, I'm Tammy Burke, and I'm from Canterbury, and I have 3 that graduated from Belmont, and I reached out to my daughter, who's in Greece right now, and just said, hey, I was just asked to go to a school board meeting. Any thoughts on the 4-point grading system? She comes back with this big essay. So if you don't mind, I'm just gonna read it, okay? She says, as a former student of BHS, I've experienced firsthand multiple Belmont grading systems, and I know both the pros and cons of each. And I truly believe that the drawbacks of the 4-point system could not possibly overcome the benefits, and that it is in no way superior to the letter grading system used before. All my life, I've loved to learn and thoroughly enjoyed going to school. But when Belmont switched to 4-point grading, that passion began to burn out. This system not only makes it harder to succeed, but it discourages many students from even attempting to succeed. I can recall countless times when I felt frustrated and defeated when I got a 3 instead of a 4. I asked myself on many occasions whether the exhaustion and stress from the extra work I had to do to get a 4 was even worth it. Even when I tried my hardest, put in extra study hours, asked more questions, and answered all the level 4 questions on my tests, I rarely got the results I was aiming for. There is no winning in this scenario. Either I was deterred from even trying for a 4, or I was engulfed in anxiety and pushing myself too hard. And on the other end of that, I was usually disappointed in myself either way, either for not going that extra mile for the grade I wanted, or for giving it my all and still not being good enough. Not only is a 4 an oftentimes unrealistic goal, but there was also a lot of discourse in the expectations to meet that goal. Some teachers required extra credit work to get a 4. Others required a perfect 10 out of 10 on every test or presentation, and sometimes required increased participation, and all these requirements are problematic in their own right. Also, there's no adequate standardization of what qualifies a 3 versus a 4. I repeatedly adjusted my learning styles and the work I submitted, trying to stay in rhythm with what a specific teacher wanted. Because of the lack of consistency, students have to bend themselves backwards, sideways and forwards again in the 3 minutes between each class to prepare for each teacher's expectations. Balancing sports, clubs, employment, volunteering, social and familial lives, personal hobbies, and more is already inundating. Juggling what specific expectations you need to meet for each class is an unnecessary stressor added onto students' already busy lives. Additionally, a 2 versus a 3 or a 4 is entirely too subjective. A letter grading system makes it a lot easier to know what grade you're going to get and why. If I get a 9 out of 10 on a test, I know I'm gonna get a 90 or an A. But with a number system that, sorry, somebody text, 9 out of 10 could be a 3 or a 4 depending on the teacher's policies, although it would usually be a 3 since it wasn't a perfect score. There's also much more significant difference between the number grades and letter grades. For example, I could get anywhere between a 90 to 100 and get an A, but there's less room for error between a 3 and a 4. Unless I get 100, I won't get that 4, except for on a very lucky occasion when a teacher allows for mistakes. Although all through elementary and middle school and the beginning of high school, I always received grades that I believed accurately reflected my efforts. As someone who always held myself to a high standard, it was devastating watching my A's slip to a 3 and watching my GPA slip with it. I was disheartened, and I started lowering my standards since maintenance of my previous one was now unfeasible. Instead of striving for 4s across the board, I crossed my fingers that there'd be at least a couple sprinkled throughout the report card, and I know that I wasn't alone in this sentiment. And I know that no teacher, especially in my experience at BHS, wants to set their students up for failure. And they shouldn't have to, but that is exactly what 4-point grading does. Not only would a student achieve less at the high school level, but if they don't get as good of grades as they might have in the letter system, then it will hold them back in the future as well. A student might not get into their dream or reach school, or even just as good of a school as if they'd like, if they don't have grades that are a true representation of their abilities and efforts. Also, financing higher level education is hard enough as it is, but academic scholarships too are all more unobtainable with a 4-point scale. And anyone who knows me knows that I love a good challenge. However, it's not a challenge if there's no overcoming it or growing from it. I'm not going to overcome a bad grade in a system that makes a good one impossible to obtain. I'm not going to grow from failure after failure in a system that's designed to keep me from doing so. 4-point grading does not truly reflect performance, as the difference between a 4 and a 3 is perfection versus passing. And perfection should never be the bar, especially in an educational setting in the most formative years of our lives. And that was written by my daughter, who's a sophomore at college.
She's a good writer.
Way better than me. And I also have the other 2 kids that I want to say too, like, you have my overachiever, and then you've got my other one that's like, oh, I'll settle for that 3. Oh, as long as I have a 2.5 so I can pass classes and still play sports. But then I had one that failed on purpose, because if he failed a class, he got scheduled for targeting learning time. That meant he got one-on-one teaching with a teacher, and then he immediately took that test at the end of TLT time, and then he'd pass. So he was in a routine of, let's fail so I can pass. And I don't think that's helping him in the real world today. But that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we appreciate you coming out tonight and sharing, and thanks to Deanna for sharing her thoughts with us too in Greece.
Just, if I can touch on I know we're not at that point in the meeting, but because it's really just us talking, I mean, unless somebody's gonna stand up and make a motion, like, I think we're just talking about things tonight, like, I don't think any decisions are being made. I have a ton of questions myself,
So are you
I don't wanna
proposing
give
to
people
move
the
it?
impression that everything's gonna change tonight. I mean, I appreciate hearing the feedback, I didn't wanna give any false impressions either.
Right. This, we're starting the competency-based education discussion tonight. So yes, as someone said, I think it was you, Sue, who said it was on the agenda. And it is, to start the discussion around it. And some of the things you've shared, particularly around the union sending out a survey, seems like new information to everybody at this table. So we'll be talking about it tonight, but it's not up for action, so.
I just hope that you guys can actually really think about the whole piece of it all, and put it all together and just not be like, oh, well, we've spent so much money on it and we put a lot of time and effort into it, but I think we really need to look at the whole aspect of this and as to whether or not this actually really is good for kids, because there are many towns that do just fine with the 100-point scale, and I think kids and parents understand it. I actually chatted with some friends at work yesterday who live in Ware and who live in Concord, and they do the 4-point scale and they're like, I have no idea what this means. My kid is off to competency-based recovery and I have no idea what she's doing. I have no idea what she's missing. I have no idea how to even understand what this all talks about. And they both were like, I'm frustrated by this, but nobody else speaks up and nobody else says anything. And I think this is the problem, that now because the whole school system is involved in it, parents don't know. They don't know what they don't know, so they don't know how to ask a question. They don't know that this is actually not helping their kids to strive to be better.
Thank you.
So,
We definitely will take that under consideration for sure. Okay, so next up is board member reports. Jen?
We had a withdrawal study committee meeting last night. It was the first one when we had the larger group together. One of the things we discussed is we want to do a survey to both Belmont and Canterbury parents and non-parents to talk about things that are important to them. So obviously the only people with all the information on current students and their parents' contact information is the SAU. So we didn't know if you would be open to sending it out on behalf of the committee. It would be like, you could stay, right, it's just, we're gonna try and find as many ways as possible to get out to people. I told them I would ask.
Thoughts? Assuming Michael doesn't have a problem sending stuff out.
Just give me what you need, send out, forward it from the committee if that's what you need. That's not hitting everybody though.
No.
How are you gonna get it out to the people in the town, so.
We're discussing at the next one multiple different ways, but we knew that the best way to get parents would be if it came from the SAU.
And even with that, the reverse call, system, if a link could get, sent out to the survey, that way as multiple ways to try to get people to respond.
You're talking about doing an all-call to the district? I do have a problem with that, quite honestly, because I use that all-call specifically for emergency purposes, if you will, or if we need to notify of a school event in a timely manner. I guess I could do that if that's what we need to do. It just starts muddying
I
the
don't
water
know,
with the purpose of the all-call.
we were just thinking out loud, as a possibility.
I mean, I'm okay with it going out via email because it would be clear, I'm assuming that it's from the withdrawal study committee, not from the board or anyone, thing like that.
Yeah, I'll forward whatever you send me to say this is I'm forwarding this from the withdrawal study committee.
I'm more concerned with going out as an all-call or a text. It's hard to put who that's from in there, so we've had, I don't wanna say issues with surveys before, but I think surveys get dicey when there are multiple audiences. So we've dealt with it as a board before, where if teachers say one thing, families say another, and community members say another, and then we have to act on it.
Yeah, no, we have a laundry list of questions we're gonna be discussing, and one of them is like, are you a parent, are you a student, are you a community member, you're a former student, so we are gonna find ways to get that.
Is that data gonna be publicly available?
I think it has to be.
Yeah.
Like the raw data?
Right. Yeah, it's all Freedom of Information Act, so if someone asks me for it, I'd send it to them.
It's
all-
a committee that's publicly funded,
Yeah.
so, yeah, good
Yeah,
have to be.
I had no qualms about it.
I have a question. Do you have your volunteers now, both of
We
you?
do. We have a 9-person committee.
Who's on it?
So, Tracy Leclerc was the only person that applied from Belmont. She was also a returning member, but it was Charlie Crowman, returning member, it is Sumner Dole, it is, we gotta go around Jessica Treadway, it's a big group, I'll say, it was Calvin Todd. Trying to think if I'm missing any. I don't think I'm missing any.
You, me.
Is he related to you?
Yes, he is. They all know about us, though.
And the two select board members.
And then our select board members, which were
Right.
very communicated, but it's
Travis and,
Cheryl Gordon.
yeah, so there's none.
And is everybody open? Because I know you were looking for people being open to having an open mind.
Our biggest thing is like people willing to do the work, not ones that come in and say, nope, we shouldn't do this. But yes, everyone on it appears to be committed, be a very productive group.
I don't know how to phrase this question, so I'm just gonna say it. If there's only one person that applied from Belmont, could that one person feel that they are underrepresented?
I don't know. So she said that she talked to some people, I know, or talked to some people. So we do have Mark, Travis, and Tracy, so there are 3. Again, it's about bodies to do the work, and we are like looking at it as, well, this isn't like a Belmont versus Canterbury thing. This is a what is in the best interest. So like we have to come up with a plan for both if we decide to do this. So it's not about like people being underrepresented. You know, we want to talk to Belmont families too. We want everyone's input.
So the 2 main questions that we came up with, I mean, realistically are, you know, is it in the best interest educationally, and is it in the best interest, you know, financially, you know, for Canterbury to withdraw from the district? I mean, those are the 2 big, you know, big umbrellas, and then, you know, underneath that is a whole, you know, slew of questions asked.
So what do you need tonight, Randy, to know whether you can send it out?
We just
via
know
email?
if you would be open to it.
I'm open to the email, but not the all-call.
Take what we could get.
I would do this basically because I could have any type of committee in any of the towns reach out to me and ask me to do an all-call for them, and it's not the purpose of our messaging system. I don't wanna go down that road.
Randy, what's the selectmen, what's the?
Travis O'Hara and Cheryl Gordon.
Thank you.
So that's what you need. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Sean, board member reports. Board member reports.
Yeah, there was some thing that I did, I'm drawing a blank right now. As we go around, I'll try to think of it.
Okay. Alice? I attended graduation from the high school. It was inside, very well done, super hot, very warm, very, very warm. But it was very nicely done, and there was some additions this year to, what is it, a Red Raider Award or something? No, it wasn't a Red Raider. I don't remember. There was a couple of new things that they started at the high school that I thought was really nice in terms of recognizing different students and such, so. Okay.
Yeah, I'm still drawing a blank.
Okay. Michael, CES, new teacher.
You see, I put in your packet a request to add a teaching position to the Canterbury Elementary School, because we currently have 22 students registered for kindergarten starting next school year. That doesn't include any over the summer registrations or just right at the start of the school year. We also get registrations. In my opinion, a class of 22 for kindergarten is too large, so I'm asking that we add a position to CES for next school year. You see in there, we do anticipate a savings in salaries and benefits due to some vacancies starting off the 23-24 school year. And we can use those to offset the cost of an additional teacher, and what we would have to do is monitor the budget very closely as we go through the year. I'm not looking to eliminate any positions, I'm looking to add a position in the operating budget, but not add monies to the should see a savings in salaries and benefits because of vacancies at this position.
Just so when you're positioned, if you don't have a lot of kindergartners for the following year, 24, 25,
I'm approaching it, that's why I put in the motion for 23, 24. However, I'm sure I'll be bringing it to you during our proposed operating budget process. Because that class will move to first grade. We'll still need 2 teachers for the first grade
Are
as they
there
work their way through.
2 for first grade next year, because they split it 2, right?
So we have 2 for kindergarten right now, so, and 1 for first grade, so we'd have to be, basically, one of those kindergarten teachers would be moving to first grade because we have a very large kindergarten class this year.
Because there's like a
we're gonna-
floater teacher.
There's a floater
Right.
teacher, CES, so next year we need two first grade and 2 kindergarten because of class size. Right now, we only have 3 for basically 4 positions that we need.
Other questions?
Do we know what BES enrollment for kindergarten is at yet?
I don't, their class size, I don't know for next year, I didn't ask that question. I know that they're under 20, their classes.
For all 4 classes.
I think for transparency, I think we'll put it in the budget for next year anyway, but next budget season, when we put it in the packet, we don't anticipate any additional positions. Like, we should state that we did add a position this current year,
Right.
just to make it clear. Because if somebody were going to go
Yes,
back
I
to that,
agree.
they would say, oh, they didn't.
Yeah.
Now, we didn't necessarily know the numbers at that time, but still.
You could add like a disclaimer, like subject to change based on enrollment. Like, do,
That's a good
we have the
suggestion.
room
Yes, we
to
did.
have 2 first grades, 2 kindergartens.
Where are we gonna put
Yes,
them?
we did. There is, so, there's a classroom on the lower floor
Yeah,
that we can put some of our specialists in that classroom to open up a classroom on the first floor.
Are all 22 kindergarten students Canterbury residents, or is it a mix? Okay.
What's cap, like, what happens if this happens next year? Like, it's another big class, like, is there a max number of,
No, there's no cap on our
when the second
enrollment
graders go
numbers.
to third grade, is there gonna be another teacher for the third grade as they go all the way through?
Or, I mean,
Yeah,
we
we
have
do.
bubble classes sometimes that just work their way all
we
the way
have 2
through.
in a
so-
row.
So now we have a large kindergarten class coming in, it's gonna stay, I mean, enrollment numbers can fluctuate depending on move-ins and people moving out. So we might have large class sizes, I should say, large enrollment numbers for Canterbury if people continue to move into town and register their students.
So it's possible, we've had 1 floater and it's worked, but now we have 2 large enrollment. If the trend continues, it would mean more teachers
Yeah.
here. I mean, that's
eventually we're gonna run out of classrooms.
correct.
There's a lot of property in Cambridge. For new houses.
But we're advertising it as a 1 year, or we're advertising it straight up?
We're advertising it straight up, we didn't put a 1 year on there.
Is it posted already?
We posted as anticipated.
Other thoughts?
Motion to approve an additional teaching position at CES for the 2023-2024 school year.
Second.
I do have a thought though.
Okay.
I've been hesitant to put anything about class sizes in any formal policy, but I do think at some point we might want to consider, what's the magic number? We've got 22 in 4th grade, do they get a second? I mean, I know at BES they had class size that at one point 25, 26, and we never considered adding another teacher to those. Times are a little bit different now than they were, but I do think we might, I mean, it's something to consider. We've gone back, and it feels like we've gone back and forth on that discussion over the years. we've said, let's be safe and not put anything in there as far as like minimum class size or maximum class size before we create normal.
Do you mean class size like per teacher or class size by grade?
By teacher.
By teacher.
So looking at these numbers, like for current enrollment for kindergarten for Belmont Elementary, it's 50 kids over 4 teachers. For first grade, it's 53 over 4 teachers.
Yeah.
Canterbury has 22 for 1, like, for in 4th grade, like it looks like there's quite a difference, but
Yeah, one option is you take
lower.
one from BES and move it. That's another option. I'm not saying we always hire more teachers. Maybe we
Correct.
look at it and go, no, at this grade level, we're comfortable with this number. And if we're under that number, we look at reallocating resources that way.
I agree.
It doesn't have, yeah. Not one
Depending
school,
on
yeah.
enrollment numbers.
I mean, if we're one district, we're looking at both
Correct.
schools
I agree.
and doing what's best for all of these. And if that means making one class bigger somewhere else to make another class here smaller, we consider that.
And has there been any consideration for the Shaker Road side being, or the Canterbury side that's close to Belmont, transporting to BES to try to even some of those numbers out?
I don't think there's ever been considered. In the many years
No.
I've been involved.
Nor would I overall support that. I think right now, I think one of your questions, right now, my understanding is if you live, so I live over there, so if you live over there, if I wanted to go to BES, historically, that's been allowed.
But any
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Belmont
Regardless
is
of
allowed to
Vice
send
versa.
Yeah.
kids to Canterbury as well.
Well, it hasn't always been that seamless over the years. No, it has not. Yeah,
Based
I
on-
wasn't aware of that
Based
every,
on class size usually.
right. Because,
If there's space available.
correct, because if BES was full, they don't have to take a Canterbury student, and Canterbury was full. But now we're gonna separate, which I support, like getting another teacher, but now we're gonna have small classes.
But yeah, I mean, I asked a question, you know, based off what you were saying. I mean, if you're looking at allocating resources district-wide,
Yeah.
there's more than just the one step of allocating a teacher resource. You know, it could be a transportation piece as well.
Mhm. So the request tonight is a motion to approve an additional teaching position for this upcoming school year. Did Ben think that, did Mr. Hill think that they needed all 4? I don't even know how many kindergartens.
Can't imagine that discussion's even been had. I'm not saying to do anything this second. I just think that when it comes to policy and all that, we should at least start having these discussions, especially if there's a changing in demographics too.
So this is up for action.
we have a motion on the table.
And a second. And a second, okay. So I can call it. All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Debbie, PCard rebate.
So as you can see in the report, we usually get a rebate on the PCard every year, which is typically put in the Technology Special Revenue Fund. And this year, we've received $10,314.24.
And what's the balance in the Technology Special Revenue Fund?
I did not look that up.
Debbie.
I know.
So I'll make a motion, but I have a question. Motion to authorize the PCard rebate funds to be placed in the Technology Special Revenue Fund.
Second.
Sean, you had a question?
So that Technology Special Revenue Fund, that revolves, like it doesn't have to be closed out
Correct,
at the end of the year.
correct.
And we've been using it on occasion. I remember having
Last year when you were doing some stuff with the internet, so we used
Oh, yeah.
that money.
Thank you. So this has been, motioned and seconded. Does anyone have any additional questions? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Okay, next up is competency-based education discussion. So we're gonna start this discussion. Michael is going to go over a historical perspective regarding our path to personalized teaching and learning. And we're also gonna talk briefly, like, to get on the same page about what does competency-based mean, what does proficiency scales mean, what does competency-based grading on a 1 to 4 versus just so we all use the same terminology. So Michael, you're gonna start with your,
Okay, so what I wanted to do is I just wanted to include for the board, particularly for those that didn't experience what we had started as a district 8 years ago now, a little bit longer than that. Just when I first was brought on board, I would agree with Susan and her comments that it was messy. We had students that were experiencing multiple types of grading scales, and there was a handful of teachers that were piloting what they were calling competency-based education at the time. It seemed like it was a top-down move, and it caused some conflict in the district. So I came in as an interim and started taking this on to try to make some sense of it all, and just move the district in a path that they had already started going down, and just getting a more collaborative approach to the process. So these are some slides that I've pulled off of some presentations in the past. We did a culture survey, I should say the district did a culture survey back in 2015, I believe. Hired UNH Survey Center to do this culture survey. And I pulled this statement out of that survey. I'm gonna go through these slides. The unclear of direction of personalized learning, concern of lack of a written plan, what is missing is a plan to learn from, what is working and what is not, shared decision making, so all own it. So right off the bat, I developed the shared leadership model, which is that next slide, which is still a functioning team at this point, and this is our current model for shared leadership in the district. We have what's known as a district support team, and you can see that's superintendent, 4 principals, director of student services, the director of curriculum instruction, and 4 teacher leaders. That sits on the district support team. And then at all 4 schools, they have what are known as building leadership teams. And those are teacher leaders that are selected by either their grade level or department to sit on the building leadership team. They meet regularly. And then you have in there what I put in all staff. Those are basically professional learning time that they have for all their staff. So a grade 4 will meet together and they'll talk about what they might need or ideas that they have, and then they bring that to their building leadership team for discussion or support, and ultimately it could make its way all the way up to the district support team to see if we need to provide any support to make something happen. Same goes, you see those arrows go in both directions. I, as a superintendent, could come up with an idea that could impact the entire district. I wanted to make sure that we had the right representation around the table to help with that decision, and that we could get feedback through this leadership model, this shared leadership model, before a decision is made. And it's been working well, and it continues to function in this capacity. So there's an entry point for anybody to have an idea, want to run it all the way through. It could be potentially turn into a district-wide decision that impacts everybody. Or it might just stay at the building level, or at the grade level, or department.
just have two quick questions.
Sure.
What does CPT stand for?
That is it's basically their collaborative professional time.
Do they use that term? Teachers.
This is an old slide, they probably changed, they call PLCs now, professional learning.
Okay, I think
The only reason, so CES didn't have that,
That's because they meet as a whole, there's 7 teachers.
and then I'm assuming they don't have a building leadership team because it's just one
They all meet
administrator.
as one staff.
Okay.
So then, what I wanted to show you is, we put together a timeline that, because it basically, we were all over the place with trying to implement what we were calling personalized teaching and learning. And there was a lot of different language that was being used throughout the district. But more importantly, we wanted to put together a timeline for people to know this is the path we're going, these are our benchmarks along the way. So for the teaching and learning aspect, and we titled it Our Learning Progression, because as a whole district, we were learning how to make this work. So in 2016 and 17, we developed common language. 17-18, we vertically aligned standards, attached proficiency scales, determined K-12 habits of work. 18-19, we focused on grading and reporting. Where people fall short in trying to bring forward competency-based education is they jump right to the grading and reporting, but they don't talk about the teaching and learning practices that potentially have to change. So that can cause conflict if people don't understand how to potentially teach in a competency-based educational system, or even if students how to learn in that system. You can't just put grading and reporting before that. So we took a different path in order to try and make sure that it was smooth along the way. And then in 1920, that's when we called flip the switch. That's when the whole district went to competency-based teaching, learning, grading, and reporting.
So prior to that, was it just like the elementary schools that were doing it? So like I've had a child in the district for 8 years and I've never known anything besides the one before.
Right, and that's where we are at this point. There isn't a student, I should say, that's going through our system at this point that knows anything differently.
So even the high school stuff, because
The
it,
last class
Last
was
one.
my daughter's last, 22,
okay.
that had the dual.
That's a good question. So the teaching and learning component, we did develop common language. This is the language that we still use. There's defined competency, we define standard, and we define learning targets. There were multiple words being used across the district to define these things. So your competency is an overarching concept. Your standards are really those measurable learning objectives. And then learning targets are basically what your goals are for a specific lesson. And I try to put a sort of a flow to it. So you have learning targets that are aligned to each standard, and then standards are aligned to competencies. And you can see that in the next slide as well. So a teacher could develop learning targets as part of a lesson that address a standard, and then the standards are, you have a certain number of standards within each competency.
Yeah.
Pesky fly.
Yeah.
So then what we started tackling, once we had that common language in place, the curriculum development piece came into play, and that's where we started vertically aligning standards. So we have, we'll take English language arts, we have K-12 English language arts standards that are all vertically aligned. So we know what our kindergarten students are gonna learn for English language arts for standards, and our senior English class has standards, and they're all vertically aligned. We put all teachers across grade levels together to develop these standards and align them. And then each standard has what's known as a proficiency scale attached to that standard, and that's what's used for grading. All of that, as I noted in here, all of our standards and our proficiency scales are located in Empower, which is our learning management system. And then we focused on grading and reporting, where we have the proficiency scales, the rubrics, and then at one point, I want to say that was back in 1920, when we flipped the switch, we went to a common format of our report cards. The transcripts at the high school are much different because you have to have a school profile to go along with those transcripts. But our report cards themselves, progress reports and report cards across the district are the same, K to 12. Because there were multiple formats of report cards and how things were being reported. It was very confusing for staff, students, and parents. So we had common reporting based on common grading practices. Now, clearly, the points that have been brought up is that there's some inconsistencies in grading practices. That's clearly something that we need to look at. As for the system itself, we put all this put it all into play back in 2015, and then we went full competency-based in 1920. And there was a lot of collaboration to get to that point, and it was teacher-driven by all means, particularly with the work behind developing the standards, aligning the standards, the proficiency scales, the rubrics, all of that. We want to make sure that it wasn't a top-down process in any way whatsoever. This was all organically developed, if you will, with a lot of hard work from teachers.
But Michael, there's a difference between full competency-based versus the grading system, correct?
Yes.
So there's competency-based, which by regulation and law, we have to be. But the grade, you can be full competency and not be on the 1 to 4 proficiency scale.
Absolutely.
You
can have any
wanted
type
to,
of-
right, I
yeah,
just wanted to
letters,
make that
grades.
distinction.
Symbols, there's,
I have questions on what not to talk
so yes, to your point. That's why we didn't focus on the grading and reporting first. We wanted
Right.
to make sure that we understood.
But when you say we went full competency, that's the year we went full competency, proficiency scales, grading and reporting, like the whole
The whole
package,
package.
across the district.
across the district, correct. Do you want people to ask questions about what you said so far?
Yeah, that's fine, absolutely.
So, oh, you
Go
go.
ahead.
No, you go. What if we have the same question?
I don't know if it relates to what you're talking about, so go ahead.
All right, so this was teacher-driven to go towards competency-based education. Grading and reporting came later. Were there concerns at the time about how they would grade and report on this, or?
Yeah, there were concerns all the way through because people didn't know, basically, that they hadn't had the experience behind it. So there was a lot of professional development in order for them to get a good understanding as to how they're gonna grade in this type of system. A lot of it, quite honestly. And, you know, some were happy about it, some probably not so much, that still aren't happy about it. But we made the choice to go down this direction.
Sean, you're next.
So the state requires competency.
Competency.
Do they provide any information as to what that actually means?
It can be interpreted in different
Yeah.
ways. The way our state likes to operate is that they leave it up basically to local,
Until they do.
Correct.
up to your local district to work their way through. When we say it's required, it's part of the minimum standards for school approval to have competencies. As for the teaching, learning, grading, and reporting practices, it's up to the local districts as to how they implement it.
So to come back what you're talking, I mean, and guidance from the state, way back in 2007, when I was trying to lead Pittsburgh through this, there were all the same questions that you identified. How is the grading gonna work? What's the report card, gonna look like? How are we generating the competencies, and then your indicators, underneath it. One of the things that I tried to do is, and I put it out there as, if we had a student in Pittsburgh that was in Algebra 1 in ninth grade, the set of competencies that exist for Algebra 1 should be almost identical to a set of competencies that exist in Nashua for Algebra 1. And the problem was that they weren't. And so, I mean, you identified one of the huge hurdles, or not hurdles, the pitfalls of competencies is that the state mandates it, but then they give it all to local control. And so, whether it's Shaker, whether it's Guilford, whether it's Interlakes, Nashua, Concord, whomever, everybody is kind of excited out of the starting gate that we have a local control to create the competencies that we want, but then realistically, the competencies all over the state are wildly different. And I don't feel that's a good plan. And again, I mean, we can identify that as a bigger fish to fry, but it's one of the massive, pitfalls of this entire, philosophy.
Did you have a question too, from what Michael presented, or just comment? I just wanna make sure.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, that was more, it was more of a comment, I mean, kind of, drawing out, some of the issues that I'm sure confusion on the student's part, confusion on parents' part, especially when you have, some students that are, fairly, transient, going from district to district. Even so, I mean, and I don't want, if I'm jumping ahead and you wanna stop me, don't hesitate. In that code I pay for earning credit, it specifically references mastery of the competency. Well, my interpretation of a 2 or 2.5, that is not mastery. Mastery is 3 and above, at least in my interpretation. So there's even conflict at the at the district level of what is being expected in the individual classroom, and then what is being expected district-wise, what is being expected credit-wise, and then what is being expected policy-wise.
Any questions, I just wanna, before we move on to the policies, any questions about what Michael's presented so far?
My goal was just to give you an
Right.
overview of the district's approach to implementation.
And then Michael included in the packet, I don't know if you have anything to say about it, and what, how many policies? 4? 4 policies, that relate to earning of credit, the grading system, learner progress through our learning competency-based system, and then competency-based education, and there's legal references and stuff. What I wanna be, for tonight, we are not going to be dissecting the policy, because that's not the board's role at this point in time. We have a policy committee and we can have a plan, so we're not, I mean, we recorded your concern. I'm just saying, we're not gonna wordsmith the policy itself.
I do have a general question
Yeah.
on policies.
Oh, no, please, we can definitely ask
Okay.
questions or concerns, yeah.
Alright, so you presented 4, do we know if those are considered required policies? That's my first question. And 2, as a follow-up, are those if they are required, are they taken from the NHSBA, or are those Shaker worded policies?
Just with any of our policies, and particularly if there's a reference to an RSA, then that would be required. I don't
Anything
have
with
this-
RSA is required.
So 1K,
If you have an RSA that lays out something that needs to be in policy,
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a requirement for that policy, it's a reference, but if it's a law, it should be in policy somewhere. I don't have that information, Sean, because
I'm not necessarily expecting you to have it, but I'm kind of curious, because my impression is a lot of our policies, we've taken some of the wording from NHSBA. I didn't know if that's what we were going to be doing on some of these at some point, or as part of the regular reviewing of the policies, or if we're keeping them Shaker-centric, like the grading system. NHSBA isn't gonna spell out what the grading system is, I get that, but for the other ones, I was kind of curious.
Yeah, the majority of our policies in the entire policy manual are wordsmith from School Boards Association sample policies. And they indicate whether they're required, optional, or recommended. So that's part of our overall review process.
and you'll see, if you look at these 4 policies, IKA, which is the grading system, has no references as a part of it, in terms of
RSAs.
the RSAs and those types
because it just went into the I section, which is instruction, and did a search for any policy that said competency, proficiency scale, or that sort. These are the four that popped up.
They're kind of confusing and they contradict themselves. Some even within the same, I know we're not gonna get into.
No, but that's,
But
so what I wanna do is have a discussion and Greta can record it, like what are our questions that we would have, or comments or concerns? And we can do some rounds of that, but I also want us to take some time to look at it, and Jill's not here to be able to comment on it as well, so that we can structure some of the discussions. So Randy, do you wanna say what you?
I will, so, and only because Mr. Finch talked to us about how you earn credit. It was, you have to have an average of a 2.5 with no individual standard below a 2.0. So the first line of IK, it says it can earn, students can earn course credit by demonstrating mastery of the required coursework and material. Mastery is defined as a high level of demonstrated proficiency with regard to competency. But then when you go to the next one, it says, although it targeted is 3, 2 is proficient, like.
With the next policy, you mean?
Right, so if you had all 2s. and they
Proficient
average-
in the foundational knowledge is what you're saying.
Right, so it
Yeah.
would appear that, like,
Right.
it doesn't really make sense based on how he told us it's earned. And then the last sentence of that is credit will be awarded upon satisfactory, or last paragraph, demonstration and mastery of the required competency. So then it's like, okay, so what is satisfactory? Is that, so like I said, it kind of contradicts itself based on what he told us.
So your concern is contradictory in nature of what you're seeing in front of you.
Right. And also, it appears in here that a 2 should be passing grade.
When the understanding and the
Breaks my
expectation
heart, but-
from the state, I mean, my understanding is that a 3 is what is considered to be proficient and obtaining credit.
Right. And well, so in 3, it says the target proficiency level for all students is to achieve a score of 3.0. We describe that targeted knowledge as complex knowledge.
Yeah.
And, you know, even hearing the comments from the public earlier, I kind of felt like I was in a corporate performance review because no one ever gets a 5. It's like the unattainable, but so it's interesting. And then when you look at a 4, it says that you go beyond the targeted. So like targeted is now complex,
Right.
but not, so it's very confusing.
And I think for me, my concern is, bless you, is first of all, I want to continue, well, we have to continue competency and the personalized teaching and learning. My concern is the grading system, because I actually think the student when Tammy was reading the students, my concern is that you only have a 0 to a 4, so there's not enough of a distinction. So the student who a 9 out of 10 or an 8 out of a 10, is that a 3? Is that a 3.5? Is that a 2? There's no, you can't convert it to a grade, because it's either a 3 that you meet proficiency. So you can't have, I mean, and think about it when we had the 100-point scale, even if we had 93 to 100 is an A and whatever it is for a B and whatever. If you get credit at a 68, what's the difference between a 68 and a 98, right? Like, I don't know, both earn credit, which is why I'm okay with a 2.5 or whatever we change it to, because we can't have everybody having to achieve at a 98 or at a 4 or at a 3. So there's not enough room in these, I guess what I'm saying, to me, there's not enough room in these bands to be able to grade effectively. And I would also agree, my concern is the inconsistency with teachers, specifically at the high school level, because that's my most recent experience with the grading. It is all over the map. So again, my issue is the grading system, not the competencies or the individualized teaching and learning.
It was interesting also when listening to the public comment, like as a parent of a middle schooler who got a lot of fours this year, is very proud of him. If he goes into high school and doesn't, like, I'm gonna have some questions for him. And I think it would, like, not knowing that, like, you can't achieve that, or it's so hard to achieve, like, that would be really hard for me. Like, I'm probably gonna be a lot more sympathetic to our conversations about gradings now, knowing this, but if it's not consistent, that's gotta be hard on kids when their parents come into play and look at those report cards.
So, I mean, I'll let, Jeff speak directly to his kids' experiences, but I've spoken to many parents since March, when I did the meet and greet, and I expressed my dissatisfaction with the competency-based grading. My neighbors, Boiselle, they've yanked their kids out of Belmont schools to go into private and charter. I've talked to Ehrlichs, I've talked to Edrins, Gilbert, and this district is losing students because of the implementation, primarily because of the grading aspect of it. I'm not completely against the instruction, although within that instruction, we need to somehow, I mean, it was identified, we need to bring back some high stakes testing. We need to bring back some midterms and finals and that type of thing, and that's a different, a different conversation. But on the grading, the grading end of it, and I'm sure Belmont is not unique. I'm sure there are students that are fleeing other districts, for private education. I don't know how they're affording it, or homeschooling, that type of thing. But it's an easy change, I guess, and maybe I don't know all the nuts and bolts to it, but, grading programs have to have accommodations, for what scale that you'd like to use. I have to also assume every new teacher within the district went to college on a 100-point scale. So it's not gonna be new like when it got jammed down everybody's throat back in 2007, 2008, where we're gonna make this change because one of the Department of Education's children didn't want to take a music class and they were in a guitar band and they wanted credit for that extracurricular activity. It's where, like I said, we're losing students. We're losing students within the district, and they're not coming here because of our schooling.
So, getting back to the competency-based learning versus the competency-based grading. As much as we might have opinions, and we might all have different opinions, we might be all on the same page, I feel like the union has a pretty big say in this as well, and I'd be curious what they think. Do we have a majority of the teachers that would prefer the 100 points grading scale? Like, for all I know, we could have 80% that are in favor of it. We could have new teachers coming to us from colleges having to learn and grade or whatever. I personally, I saw all the work that went into the competency-based learning and the proficiency scales, and when it's done well, and it's shown to the parents by the teachers, some of which were done for us, they were great. I knew my kid had to do this, they had to do that, I knew where they failed on it, but I think that's a different conversation than they got a 3.5. That's a grading conversation. I guess one of my interests is finding out, are we having a grading conversation? Are we talking about all the other work that went into creating the competency-based learning and the proficiency scales? Are we tearing all that out? Because I would have a little bit of a concern about that, because I think a lot of work has gone into that.
From what I've seen, I feel like we're talking about grading. And I think it's important to make sure as we go through these discussions to keep them distinct and separate.
Correct. I agree.
Like, I know that we have finals now because we couldn't do a remote snow day for finals, so I think like some things have changed, some of the things we heard. You know, the deadlines and stuff, I don't know if that essentially would impact, like, how they would grade if they went to a different scale in
Right.
this. But I think we do need to kind of focus on what the discussion.
I would agree.
I agree 100% on that, Randy. The
What
focus of
grade
discussion.
levels are we talking?
What do you mean?
For what?
For assessment?
Huh?
K to 12, is it just high school?
No, I would say middle school, high school.
I'm agreeing with Randy
But
that the focus, everything I'm hearing is
Is
around
grading.
grading.
Yes.
And I think you hit it on the head too, Sean.
I'm just curious where that grading, are we talking
Well, I
middle
think
school
we
to high
need
school? We
to
talking
get to that. I know one thing I would like to see now is I'd like to see some data, like, you know, can we look at, you know, grades, like, you know, maybe you have, and not to pinpoint anyone out, like, but say, you know, like, in grades blah, 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 there are X amount of 4s, X amount of 3s, like, even break it down to like, you know, ELA or science, like, if there's teachers that are never awarding 4s, like, that would be good to know. Like, we don't wanna know which ones are not, but just as a whole, can we look at the data? Like, you know, even when we talked about credit recovery and all those students that were failing, like, what is the makeup of the student body in regards to gradings and how that's happening? I don't know if we can get that information.
As much as I like data, I guess part of me is thinking, I don't care about that, because if we were to survey, if there's like this underlying desire of our teachers, maybe administrators, to maybe relook at the grading policy and the scales or whatever, if there's this desire to do that, I don't care about the data. I want to
we
move
need that
forward
too.
with them,
Yeah.
with what everybody wants to do.
Well, but I would wanna hear from families too.
Well, and I think Michael brought that up a couple meetings ago, like, in order to continue these discussions, we need input from teachers, administrators, students, families, like, it's,
But we have to focus the conversation, which I think
Correct.
he also said. Did you have something?
I think emotion is one part of it, honestly, and I think
Right.
you're gonna get that emotion from the parents, from the teachers, you're gonna get all of that, but I do agree with Randy that data is probably what needs to maybe also be a factor to help drive the discussion. If we're just going based off of emotions,
Right.
that gets very messy,
right, what if all the teachers say, this is great, it's working awesome,
and all of the
still
parents
have
say,
this problem?
And all the parents say they.
But I want that
vice
data
versa.
for,
Well,
well,
it's all like kind of.
so, I agree to disagree. I just don't wanna waste, I don't wanna use up our time getting the data if we have an opportunity to move forward. But,
Like, are you saying like just get rid of it?
what?
You said if you don't wanna waste time getting data if we have the opportunity to move
I
forward.
wanna look in, I wanna see what the feedback of the teachers is as far as changing the grading system. Teachers and administrators, I would wanna get Silas's feedback, I'd like the principal's feedback.
I really want the family feedback too.
Yeah, sure, get all of it, I'd like the students' feedback.
And student feedback, absolutely. Like what, I don't know how we get that. What did we do before to, when you came in, Michael, what did you have to do?
Basically, I was given the charge at the time. And the only feedback that we had, which was a lot of feedback, was through that culture survey, the UNH Survey Center. But when I came on board, there was a specific direction that I was hired to take the district, and that's what I did. By a collaborative approach.
Right.
Getting feedback along the way, but knowing that this is the direction this district's going. It was in our strategic direction, and we moved it forward.
Jeff, do you have thoughts? You look
I
like you
have thoughts. I've always had thoughts about this grading system.
Yeah,
Because, I mean, my daughter was with her daughter, and this grading system kept her from getting in the Air Force, because they're like, we do not recognize this. This is no good. You need to do what the colleges are doing, what the military's doing, because these kids are gonna go through high school and they're working for a goal, go to higher education or go into a trade or whatever. And they don't, the military is like, what's a 3? They look at me, I'm like, I really don't know, you know? She could have had like a 70 or a 90, I don't know. It depends on the teacher. So I mean, we have to do these kids justice to give them grades that are consistent with higher education. Or the military's grade, they wanna see actual grades, they don't wanna see these 1 through 4. They wanna see solid numbers. So personally, I think we should just change it. When you call it the Carnegie system, 100-point scale, whatever it is. It needs to go to that, so when they go apply for college, they're comparing apples to apples, not oranges to apples. Or they can interpret what it is. That's my own personal thought. We want them to succeed when they get out of here, or not have the trouble getting into a college. And there's other aspects that we're focusing on grading, so I'll keep my other comments for another time, but I believe the grading needs to change.
So again, clearly narrowing the discussion, it's around grading at the high school level and
I think the
potentially
middle school, you should start there and get them prepared.
So middle and high,
So there's
because
not this
there was
pressure.
very minimal change to our grading practices
For
when we
elementary.
talk about
At the
elementary.
At the elementary.
So, I'm listening, trying to
Yeah.
focus where we potentially would be going after this for future discussions.
Randy, did you have something else? I just thought you were.
I know, it looks like I was going to
It did,
say
I try to anticipate if I see people, like, Alice?
I'll speak up if I have something.
I know you will, but,
I would like to know if, what percentage of teachers think that their proficiency scales could migrate to a different scoring system. We could have, I'd be curious what the community thinks. I keep saying teachers, but parents,
Yeah.
students. I want to know the community.
so how do we do that? What do we need to do that? Because, so Silas did indicate in his report, I don't know if it was the last time or 2 meetings ago, that the proficiency scales need to be looked at and, like, in a positive
He
way.
identified some deficiencies in the
Just that,
process.
yeah, so I just wonder, like, what is he doing so we could help? I don't know that we're helping with that, but how do we think about that?
From a school board role perspective, you're talking about policy IKA.
Grading,
That's what you're talking about.
Correct.
It's policy, it's a major role of the school board is
Correct.
policy. So if you're focusing on reviewing the policy AKA, which could get input from stakeholders,
right,
clearly, it really helps drive the school board discussion
right.
around a policy compared to a major systematic change in general in teaching and learning.
But around the grading system for policy, we could do stakeholder meetings, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those policies that I don't think 3 people work on. Like, it's gotta be,
No, we
it's a
have to-
district-wide community policy.
Big.
It's big. Yeah, I don't think the 3 of us could tackle the whole thing. So how do we approach it?
I'll put a flame suit on and say, I'll make a motion to return to 100-point Carnegie based grading scale for the 23-24 school year.
I'll second it for the purpose of discussion. I'm not interested in approving that motion personally, although I appreciate it. I don't want this to be a top-down approach. As if we decide we want to make a change as a community, I'm good with that, but I want to get more feedback before just making that decision. I don't want 7 people or 4 out of 7 people making this decision for everybody. I think I have a feeling on what people think.
But I feel the same way. I know how I felt when we were told in the previous superintendent era that this is what we were gonna do. I don't feel like I have enough input from the teachers, from families, from administrators. So that's where I'm at right now. and why I'm there right now. Other thoughts?
I too would like to get more information, and if we're gonna go forward with this health plan together. No one likes being told what to do. If you want to have change, whether it be change to current or change to something else, it is always best to have people on board with that, which means you gotta bring them.
Any other thoughts before we vote?
I just know that the change won't happen by the start of the school year. Changing your grading practice, the grading policy that impacts all students, all staff, all families over a summer is not realistic.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of my concern is I want the feedback from the community, from teachers. Can we even get feedback from teachers right now? Like,
I wouldn't ask them
They're not
to
under
do that right now,
contract, right?
yeah. It's just,
are they checking their email? I have no idea.
I think it's important to potentially wrap this up in the school board's strategic direction process that we need to go through, and that is where you get feedback. You know, you're talking about a significant change that's gonna impact a lot of people, so they should have some say in it. You know, and tonight's the first I heard of the union survey their teachers. Keep in mind, that's only going out to their membership, that's not going out to all teachers. So that data is only based on union membership. That's not all the teachers.
I have a question. Say we vote to change this grading system, not like this summer, but when would we have to have it done by for the following school year?
Good question.
I'm just curious, what's the timeline?
We don't have a plan right now.
I know we don't have a plan, but when would you like it to be done for the teachers so they can, if it's done, you know, if we change it, for them to implement it? Because you're talking about the summer, they can't do it this summer. So, I mean, when would it be? I'm just curious.
What would a reasonable timeframe be?
Right.
Yeah,
It depends, it really depends. I mean, you would have to probably take the year to do it, because you're talking about changing transcripts, high school profile, you're talking about changing all the proficiency scales. It's a lot of work, and
I wouldn't say change the proficiency skills, it would just be how you grade off of those, I assume. The scales themselves are the same.
the description would be different on those
See,
scales.
I don't understand, I don't know enough about that, like, why is instruction different? Because the grade numbering system changed.
Because there's a difference in the description of the numbers that are on those proficiency scales. So you're gonna have to come up with, which we did originally, which took some time, basically, how do you change a 100-point scale to a 4-point scale without interrupting a transcript or interrupting, you know, the progress of a report card. A lot went into it, and I can't sit here and say that we could do it in this amount of time.
Yeah.
Because particularly if you don't have everybody on board, then you are put in a top-down situation where you say, the school board made this change of this policy, now you need to make it work.
And that was the
And that does
problem.
not work well at all.
That was
at
the
all.
problem with the freshman academy that I think your son
Yeah,
was
what I
in.
mean for.
Well, because Griffin was in it,
Remember
but that's why then it changed again,
Mhm.
and that was not helpful.
There, yeah.
So,
How long did it take to do this the first time when the one before, what did it take? Like
5 years.
5 years, just for the grading portion?
Well, because you had to put everything in place in order to talk about the grading and reporting, which we started in 18-19.
That's district-wide 5 years, like there are some classes that,
so grading and.
there are some classes that went
reporting was
4
18,
different,
19.
4 years in a row with different grading systems.
The flip of the
So-
switch was.
There was a lot of change, and some were effective more than others.
So I'd say realistically, no less than a year.
So, but yeah, so like, if we decide to change it or whatever, like there's so much grade level? Is it everybody? Is a transcript, for the juniors, say, 3 and 3.5 and 2.75 for the first 2 years, and then it's an 80 the next year. Like, there's just a lot of little questions which aren't a big deal, but they need to be
Yes.
flushed out. That you can't just. I don't think you can make a decision today and have it ready for the start of the school year.
Okay, any other questions? Alright, so, the motion on the table is, what was your motion? The actual wording, I don't remember.
I have, a motion was made by Mark Ekberg and seconded by Sean Embry to move to return to the Carnegie grading system for the next school year.
On your point, I believe I said.
Not Carnegie grading system.
It was a Carnegie-based 100-point system.
Okay, so when we vote, if you vote in the affirmative, that means you vote for it to change beginning whatever our first day of school is, September 2nd. So, all those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye. Opposed? Aye. Abstention? Motion is defeated. So next steps though, what do I had said we could come back and, Jill can weigh in and we can think about it. Go ahead.
I think we just need more information.
So do we put this on the July agenda?
Well, the first meeting, there will be low attendance,
Right.
so it would have to be for the second one.
And I don't know if I'll be at the second one. I'm coming back from DC.
I think we keep putting it on.
Just keep putting it on.
I keep talking. I don't want it to fall by the wayside.
Because Michael's gonna find out, will they tell us? So the teachers union, whatever that survey is, and I don't know if they'll share with us, if we can ask them. Because I'm curious if they're talking, we clarified tonight we're looking at grading, particularly high school and middle school. That's my understanding. And I'm just curious if are they looking at big competency with all the components, including grading and teaching, learning, reporting?
My understanding, they're just talking about the learning management system in that survey, but I'll find out.
That's a whole different
That's a
topic
whole-
too.
It's awful. If I went in now, it still says my son's stuff is in progress. Even though I can print a progress report, now they final report card.
I can tell you one of the questions if
There
you
are
want to know.
report cards, all they are is progress reports.
Yeah, his
It's ridiculous.
Baden's final grade, your son's too, comes in as a progress report.
Yeah. It's the final grade, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
well, there's no more
No.
progress report, it ends. In high school, it ends, you either get credit or not. Can you also, are we still paying for Empower? Okay.
I actually have a question too. There's a difference between a learning management system and a student record system,
Student information system.
student
Yeah.
information system. Are we using two different systems, or are they all through Empower?
No, two systems. We use Alma for our student information system, which
So,
is all
Learning
strictly.
management system, just learning management system.
Correct, it has all of our learning progressions with all of our standards, competencies, proficiency scales. It's where student evidence is put in, it's where teachers grade.
And I should know this answer, but this is what parents should be able to log into and keep track of their students.
That you do often, apparently.
So they grade
That's
in
cute,
Google
yeah.
Classroom and then grade in Empower too, or is there like some sort of feed that, like at the beginning of the year, can the teacher say, okay, here's my curriculum for this standard, I'm gonna assign boom, 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 like hook it up to Google Classroom so that grade comes in, it like feeds.
The two don't talk.
Also because you're talking formative and summative, right? So
I
So
would imagine the
many
grading system.
assignments would go into your grade that gets put in Empower, for lack of a better way, right?
It's manually put in.
So you could have like 3 formatives that get you to where you're at on the standard. And they manually put that in, if that makes any sense.
It's really hard to explain, but there are some, I'm assuming this is one of those things, I could be wrong, where some do it really well, some really struggle. But the ones that do it really well, it is pretty impressive, all the work you've seen them
Oh, yeah.
put together, each standard. You know, they might have a formative or a summative for, you know, these standards. You can see the grade for that. I mean,
So you know of current teachers who do it well, or current instances when it's well?
Yeah.
at the high school, I
At
don't,
the high school, I can only speak to the high school right now,
All the levels.
but I would say, yeah. So.
What profile or what program or profile is being used for Empower?
There wasn't.
There wasn't.
Nope. Web to School was our student information system, and that's also where we were grading as well.
Okay, so we'll put this on the agenda for next month.
I do have one more question.
Okay.
So which came first, Alma or Empower?
Empower.
Empower.
Because there's school districts that use Alma for grading
Correct.
too. I know parents that really like it.
Yeah, the difference being is that it's not a learning management system. Alma is not, so you're not putting in evidence, you're not developing lessons. It doesn't show basically your learning progressions and your standards through there.
I think the move to both of them, Empower and then Alma, my impression is they're totally unrelated.
Yeah.
Even the moves to them were unrelated, I think.
That being said, you can grade in Alma. So it's just one system, but you lose some of the capabilities of a learning management system, which several teachers do like.
So we may talk about that at some point, if you want, we can put it,
So,
we have on.
you talk about putting it on the agenda, but what's the takeaway from tonight?
So my understanding is we've at least narrowed it down to grading, high school, middle. We wanted information on the survey that went out.
The existing survey.
The existing survey that went out to teachers. So we have a sense of what that is. Would you like to add anything else?
I would like to add, if that existing survey didn't go to both the middle school and high school, which I don't think it did, I guess I would just like to start moving forward on a survey of
Right.
middle school, high school, to start with maybe teachers, but also the community, but I
wanted to see, I was hoping they would share the survey with us as well, not just the, I mean, the actual survey, so we knew, we could have something to start with.
in hindsight, I wish we knew about it at a
I
time.
mean, I'm happy, are you okay talking to the union, I'm assuming?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. If you need assistance,
Not a problem.
no,
The sooner we can get information.
yes,
the sooner
absolutely,
we can.
absolutely. I just think we need more information in order to,
One thing I would like to know, and I don't know how we would get this, so, one of the people in the public indicated that when this was approached, they were told that like, this is what colleges do. Like, do we have any way to find out if that's true? And like what the impact is for, so like, you know, you talked about the Air Force, but like, how is this impacting like college applications?
do you wanna speak to that?
Yeah, so when we were going through this process, we brought in a full panel of admissions counselors. And they were all indicating that they review transcripts with all kinds of different grading scales from all over the world. And as long as you have a school profile that describes it, it's not a problem. That was the common theme used by all those admissions counselors. Military was not there. However, my takeaway was that it didn't really matter because as long as you could describe what a 4 is on your high school profile, or 3 or a 2 or 1, they review different transcripts from all over the world. It has no
I
impact.
guess I would second that. I still personally question how you differentiate 100 kids that all have about a 3.5 average. Like, I don't know how you do that with such a small range. But, yeah, I talk to admission counselors I know, and they're like, we've got the homeschool kids who don't have any grades. We have to decide whether they are accepted. We've got, it's just, some schools only have projects, they don't even have assessments. I think they've seen so many different variables that my concerns were lessened after that discussion. I can remember that discussion and some of the other discussions I had, but I still don't know how, again, you take 100 kids or 1,000 kids or whatever, but if you're basing them on a 4-point scale, how difficult that must be to say we can only accept 5%. Can I add one other thing that's not necessarily related to this discussion, but I heard, and I feel like I bring this up all the time, but I would really like to have a process in the school district to solicit feedback from alumni, whether they, went straight to the workforce, whether they went to college. I want to know how they're doing, what they thought of their education. I ask my own kids, I hear feedback from other kids, like, that's great information to have, and we have no process in place to do that. And it's hard, email addresses change, phone numbers change, but there's gotta be a way to get some information from the students that graduate each year and follow up with them 3 years later, 5 years later. I think that's important. I think it builds, has the potential to build pride in the community.
Okay, anything else?
Nothing else.
Oh, we're at nominations. Okay, we can recognize the resignation in the packet. And then there are 4 nominations that we can do in public if there's no questions of a personnel nature. If there are questions of a personnel nature, we will need to go into non-public.
I feel like I had a question, but I gotta find it. Pretty quick. Am I reading that we're bringing one position into the district that we had contracted out previously? And that's usually a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yes. And we contracted it out because we couldn't hire anyone previously.
That's my,
Yeah.
Yes, both nominations in there were previously contracted for both positions.
We're very fortunate.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, so I could do a motion for,
I'll make a motion to approve the nominations for the slate of positions, including the BMS, BHS Speech Pathologist, BMS, BHS School Psychologist, BHS Associate Principal, and BHS Math Teacher.
Second.
any other questions that we could address? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. And then next up is, we added an additional public communication and correspondence.
We have a resignation too.
I already, we acknowledged the resignation.
Oh, with the.
No, I did it first. We don't do anything
sorry.
besides say we acknowledge the resignation.
Okay, sorry. I don't know how I
No.
missed that one.
So, any members of the public want to share anything at this point? Tammy?
Actually, I wanted to just talk to Sean about the alumni. When I was growing up, we always had an alumni booth that was at the Belmont Library during Old Home Day. But there's also a Belmont Alumni Facebook page. So social media is a great way to reach out.
Yeah, I mean, one option is we can just try to expand on that and utilize that as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, I have a lot written down here, so I'll be more prepared for the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, but I think it is really important. Oh, like career days for Belmont, I think it would be awesome to bring some alumni back as well. Like you said, just to see, like, I have a daughter that went to UNH. She got to UNH and hated it. She's at Empire Beauty School now. So just different perspectives from different people, maybe help prepare the seniors a little bit more as to what college is.
I think what you just mentioned, I feel like that was done.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's done regularly every year, but I feel like there's like a panel of former students that have come in and talked about their experiences. And if that is, if I'm remembering correctly, that's something that I think is important and should be done every year.
It was small though, it was like 4 or
Yeah.
5 versus,
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great to expand it too, but
Holly did offer that this fall
She
too,
did.
with returning seniors as well to come back in the fall to do that.
Anyone else have anything to share? Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I was writing notes too. When we first started this whole process, it started in April of 8th grade was when it got rolled out. So it didn't start at the beginning of the year. We were told about it all year. They started slowly bringing things in and by saying, hey, by the way, here's your test or here's your assignment. This is your 100-point scale, but this would be what it would be in a 4-point scale just to get used to the numbers. But it didn't actually get started until they started seeing it in 8th grade. So when we came back to Maria Dreyer, when it got initially pulled in was in June of that year. Freshman Academy is when they officially started it. It was started in 5th grade and it was started in that 8th grade class going into Freshman Academy. Those teachers, the freshman teachers and the 5th grade teachers were the ones that got the rollout, got the professional development. Everybody else was sort of by osmosis had gotten it. The curriculum director at the time was brought to the high school but not really allowed into middle school. Mr. Pope did not allow her in. There was a lot of kerfuffle about that. She eventually ended up leaving because there were certain teachers that wanted to do it their way and that was all they wanted to do. When it got taken away and went back to the 100-point scale, when Dave Williams, and that's when Michael came into play, they started figuring things out. They went back to the 100-point scale. It wasn't, they had to figure out how to do a school profile, because I remember that very clearly, that they had to figure that out to be able to do this. For colleges, that's why they took a few years to roll it out, because they needed to put it together. So 4 years ago, when my kids were juniors, when they were 100-point scale, there was a profile. So you can go back to that because that's where it was at. There was a profile that was written. You had a 100-point scale. You just now have to align it up with the competency-based piece of things. But it shouldn't be that difficult because over the last 3 years, well, those several years, you were aligning it and trying to put it back over to the 4-point scale, that 100-point to the 4-point, because we were doing the competency-based, we just weren't doing the grading. So it should be easier to go backwards because it was already being done. My suggestion would be okay, so if you can't start it in August, I get it. I would at least try to, like focus for maybe January at the end of the semester for high school. At the end of January, when they've done finals and now they've moved on to another semester, that should be your sort of turning point to being able to do that. I don't know, I'm not a teacher, so I have no idea what y'all have to do, but there was an original profile, so it shouldn't be that difficult to go back to a 100-point scale. It's not like you're reinventing the wheel, you're just going back to that wheel. The teachers that are coming out of college are coming out of with a 100-point scale. They are not having the same level of professional development that the teachers have had over the last 8 years to do that. So to continue on with new teachers coming in, I mean, I've heard there's a mass exodus in the high school. You're down to 2 math teachers, one of which really isn't a math teacher anyway, but only a couple of science teachers. You have had a mass exodus. That's a big problem. I think the new teachers that are coming on board have not had that level of professional development to understand competency-based proficiency grading, and to the same extent that the other teachers have had. So I think that's a concern. In sophomore year, when Mr. Williams came in, several of us parents got on board with him, and had several parents who had kids that had graduated, who came back to talk to us about how is this gonna look, because we were really worried at the time about how this was gonna look towards college and what it was gonna be like. And so we talked to those parents and had them come in, and we asked him, we need homework for the kids. They have to be able to learn how to time manage. They have to be able to learn how to take a 2-hour ride to Berlin, play a soccer game or a basketball game, not get home until 10 o'clock at night, and be able to get their homework done for the next day, or to be able to study for a test, because that's the real reality of being in a high school situation and playing on a varsity level sport. You are traveling. Even if you're JV, you're still on that same bus with the varsity, and you are not coming home until everybody has played and every minute is done. And you're not coming home sometimes until 10 o'clock at night, and that can happen on a Tuesday. Back in the day when it all started initially happening, like Berlin games, and we fought tooth and nail with the athletic directors. Berlin games were not done until Friday nights, so at least they were coming home to no school the next day. Then it started slowly getting back to a Monday and a Tuesday when these kids were exhausted, having tests the next day and all sorts of assignments due the next day. That was when they actually had homework. So now they've gotten to that point where they don't. My kids, they're like, we didn't have study hall, Mom. If they gave us an extra few minutes at the end of class, we would get our work done and try to get it done as much as possible, but really we didn't have any homework. So they're not learning that time management piece that they desperately need in college, because you are now taking, back when I was in college, it was 12 credits was a full-time. Now it's 15. It's expected to have 15 for a full-time credit in college. That's 5 classes, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's just 5 classes, because you could have 2 classes that have a lab with it also. So that's a lot of schooling that they have to figure out how to time manage, along with the personal. I mean, they're all gonna party, trust me on that one. Hopefully they all get into maybe a sorority, or they have to take on a job because they have to do work study, because it is hugely expensive. I have, one kid that did work through the schooling because she had to pay her rent, because she lived off campus, and it was cheaper to live off campus than it was to be on campus, and she had to be able to pay her rent. So she had to work. So she had to figure that out. And some kids I've seen go through that are full-time hours doing all this. So we have to figure out how to time manage. They don't know how to take notes to be able to study for tests. That was one of the things that we talked about in that meeting, was figuring out how to note take. And just in the all reality of honors classes, AP classes, being able to give more rigor and competitiveness to the school district, and be able to give these kids more. I don't know if putting it out there for the data for all the parents in the district now who have never seen a 100-point scale, only when they were only being raised themselves they saw a 100-point scale, but their kids have never seen it, so I don't know if they understand. I don't think there's a lot of parents out there that understand how it's not really helping their kids. They just don't understand it. So I think going to the older kids who have already seen both systems to know the ups and downs of it is probably the better way to go. But I think also just, you gotta be able to just bite the bullet. I mean, how many more years do you need to go through with this to say that it's not working and it's not helping, and to sit here and to say that it's gonna need to take another year, when maybe we just need to figure it out and say halfway through the year we're done and we just need to pull the switch and go backwards. Cause I don't think it's really helping the kids in any such way. And I want people to move into this town and be proud of this school and be proud of this district. And I just don't think that that's happening right now. And it's a shame. We need to raise our bar as parents and as teachers and administration, board members. And I think that that's what needs to be happening. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I do. I just have two questions. Jessica Treadway, Canterbury resident. My first question is, why are we not including elementary schools and going back to the 100-point scale? There's been a lot of focus on middle school and high school, and I guess I don't understand why elementary is being left out of the conversation. And then and maybe it's not, I've only heard specific focus of middle and high school, so maybe I'm just misunderstanding the conversation. And then my second question is, when we went from the 100-point scale to the 4-point scale, what were the perceived benefits of it? Like, why was it changed at that point in time? Are we just misusing it? Like, this is not a point 2 or 4, either one. I'm just curious why the switch was made in the first place. Obviously, there were some at least perceived benefits to moving from a 100-point to a 4-point scale.
It was the purest form of doing competency-based. That was the information that we were given. That doing competency-based, the purest form was doing a 4-point scale. Not sure if I believe that, but.
I mean, I will say, we don't normally go back and forth on public comment, but and I'm not saying we won't look at it, but typically for the elementary, they've graded on a 1 to 4 scale historically, so I think that, or an INS or something like that. I think that's why we weren't looking at elementary going to a 100-point scale. But we can take that under consideration if families are
I don't
looking.
get the impression there was a big change when we moved to this in the first
Correct.
place, so
So, because it was
that was
already.
pretty seamless.
I think we've gotten feedback from middle school parents and high school parents and
Correct.
alumni, but I don't think any elementary parents have provided us with much feedback on issues with the current grading system at the elementary
Correct.
level.
So we may see something different, but just to clarify, that was.
Well, and then, sorry. Is there a big adjustment? My oldest is only going into 5th grade, so I have not done this transition yet, but is there, or was there an issue going from the 4-point scale in elementary school going to a 100-point scale in middle and high school? Was there any kind of issue with students transferring from one to the other? I don't know, I haven't gone through that. I did the 100-point scale starting in kindergarten all the way through
Right.
12th grade, and the schools, I grew up and went to school out of state, so they still do that 100-point scale from day 1 to day last.
So that will be something to take into consideration, because I don't know, we've been on the 1 to 4 for,
Yeah, it's just a thought.
Yeah.
I didn't hear it come up, so
Yeah.
I just.
no, thank you. Anything else?
I feel like, guys, I have nobody's in my house that's going to school right now. I could care less. I didn't have to spend the 2 hours here to sit here and listen to this and to do this. And I had several parents that I reached out to ask if they would come in, and thank God Tammy came in. Stan spoke highly, amazing. I don't have anything in this. I don't have any skin in the game whatsoever. I just saw my own kids go through this process. It was a really rough process. There was a lot of anxiety amongst kids through this, going through it, and it sounds like they're still struggling. And I just hope that you will take this and ride with this and know that these other kids paid a big price and they were the guinea pigs. Sean and our kids were the guinea pigs, and it was a horrible year. We had terrible teachers with terrible administration. I literally was on the phone the very first night when we got a report card after my daughter was a rock star in her progress report, and her first report card at the beginning of November, Most of the freshman class was academically ineligible because because really in all reality, nobody knew how to put this into a report card. They hadn't figured that piece out. They were winging it, they were throwing it to the fan and hope it stuck. And I literally was on the phone for 2 hours with Mr. Aguilano that night. And I was like, not sure how you can grade because grades are supposed to be fluent in a competency-based, proficiency-based system. So grades can be changing from night to night to night to night. So I'm not sure how you can be considered ineligible when it's a fluid grade. And he was like, yeah, and he sat there and was like, you're right, you're right. They had an emergency meeting at 7 a.m. the next morning trying to figure out how to make all these kids academically eligible and changing the grading system to figure it all out. And things changed real fast because all of a sudden everybody was eligible by noontime that day because they didn't know how this worked. It was just thrown out there and it wasn't done. It wasn't done correctly. It took a lot of years, and I know Michael and a lot of them worked really hard on it, but it was still a struggle because these kids have no idea how to do they don't know how to do a 4. And I don't know why would you not want to hope that a kid would want to achieve 100 and have that smile on their face when they come through that said, I got 100, Mom. Because they don't know how to do a 4 and they find it hard and they don't want to do it, they don't want to struggle, and they go for a 3. Why do you want your kid to go lower? I hope you guys do better.
Thank you. All right, next up is review and we can approve the non-public meeting minutes in public. Since that's the only thing.
That's the only agenda we have. Yeah. On the agenda item.
So.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can do a motion.
Motion to approve the June 13th non-public meeting minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Next up, motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We're done. Thank you, everyone.